I like my women like I like my swim goggles. Wet, tight, and on my face. I like my women like I like my
Hawaiian shirt.
All around my body and ready for a lay. You guys yell out something. Let's improvise. I like my women like I like my
Car.
I've been married for 25 years, so the same one since 1997.
Everybody listen to Darren Carter. Yeah. We all know he's the party starter. So if you want to listen to a podcast for free, listen to a pocket party. Pocket party. Darren.
And we're back. Hey everybody, it's your host Darren Carter, the party starter. We're in the parking lot of the Comedy Store. If you hear those sounds of people laughing, they're having a good time. And I have a guest here, the very funny Sharon Mahoney. How are you, Sharon?
I'm well, Darren. It's great to be here. It feels like we're doing a drug deal.
I know. It does, right? Like this is not in a studio. It's not even at one of the empty rooms of the Comedy Store. I'm like, come back here to the back of this parking lot.
This is desperation, but I enjoyed the fact that I didn't even question. You're like, Sharon, do you want to come in the back parking lot with me for a second? I just want to do something. I'm like, I'm there. Let's go right now.
And for the listeners, it's kind of funny because we're actually here and it's still daylight. It's not even dark.
It's weird. I will say there's a lot of places I drive in LA and I don't recognize it because I can see things. It's not at night. This is one of them.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. The reason that I came, I guess we both were here, is Tom Dreesen, the great Tom Dreesen, did a speech here, a talk to comedians at 5 o'clock. And it was like a sort of a motivational speech, and I mean, there's so many comedians that should have been here today to hear this. It was sold out, and it was cool. And it's interesting that there's time between now and then the show tonight. So there's like 3 hours. So I'm like, let me bring my equipment and let me see who's interesting and I can talk to. And Sharon came down.
Oh, come on. Let's really make it. What happened was that you were bored as fuck, and you're like, I have nothing to do, and you're like, oh God, I might as well talk to Sharon for a couple of hours because that bitch never shuts up. So there you go. That's what happened. You had nothing else to do.
Nothing else to do. No. And I'm like, hey, let's make a podcast. See if I can monetize this waiting around. It's so funny. If you guys could only see us, because, I was just cracking up. I appreciate that you agreed to do the podcast. Because, back in the day, comedians would their goal was to get on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson or David Letterman or, the Ed Sullivan Show before that. And now it's come to this, which is,
Now it's me wanting to hang out with a bald ginger in a parking lot.
Exactly.
At 6:30 at night.
Yeah.
This is my big break, Darren.
This is your big break. You should call your folks and be like, call all the
I've
relatives. Guys, there was no makeup, there was no audience.
I didn't sit on the couch with Johnny Carson, but I stood on the pavement and over top of someone else's piss.
Yeah.
Talking to Darren Carter.
I know. I was actually looking. I'm like, well, I don't even know. I think the part that we're standing on looks like they've covered like a sewer thing or something.
I'm sure there's dead bodies under here.
Yeah, we're definitely covered. This is the old Ciro's parking lot. We're here at the Comedy Store in front of a van with a rear flat tire. But yeah, so that's where we're at. Now, I wanted to ask you, where did you? Okay, so let's back up. Let's start with. I saw you. First of all, I saw you completely crush, and did great at the Stand-Up Comedy Club in Bellflower.
I love that club. It's one of my favorites.
You're so great, and you're not from America. You're from Canada. Let's take us to the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I did grow up in Toronto, and I started by going to the Second City when I was a teenager. I used to go when I was underage because I was like in love with it. I was one of those kids that just grew up watching. We had SCTV TV. I don't know if you guys got that here.
Oh, yeah. Was that with John Candy?
Yeah, it was all of them. It was
so good.
It was all the originals: Martin Short, John Candy, Catherine O'Hara, Andrea Martin. Eugene Levy, all of them, and they were part of the Second City main stage in Toronto, and then they made a television program, and they filmed it all in Edmonton. And
Edmonton, Alberta, Canada?
Yeah.
No way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, I've been there.
Yeah. Well, sorry about that, but anyways,
Yeah.
that's the best part of Edmonton is that they did that show
Wow.
there. But anyway,
Bob
so,
and Doug McKenzie.
Yep.
That whole.
Yeah, and that was a funny story because apparently they were told they had to do more Canadian content on the show.
Oh.
They had, I think, because everything in Canada has like government sponsorships and this and that, whatever. So I think there was something to do with government funding, and they were told that they had to have more Canadian content on the show. So that was them taking the piss out of having more Canadian content. Was they got around it by making fun of.
They're like, we're going to go all in with the
We're
Canadian.
going to go all the way. This is our Canadian content.
Yeah.
And
because growing up, I used to love the Dr. Demento show.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The Funny 5 at 5, Dr. Demento. Whoop 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 woo. I used to, and I didn't realize that. Hey, Hoser and all that. And Canadian take off, Hoser.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. I thought it was Bob and Doug McKenzie. I thought that was their names, but it was actually. Two comedians that played those guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You probably
Rick Moranis?
Yes, Rick
Yeah.
Moranis and
Yeah.
the other guy. I don't know their names.
That's
but,
okay. Don't worry. We're
Yeah.
Canadian. We're not supposed. You're not
Yeah.
supposed to know us.
Yeah, my dumb ass thought that was Bob and Doug McKenzie were real people.
We're part of the Witness Protection Program. Anybody famous in Canada, it's that's where if you want to go where nobody's going to know who you are, go to Canada, become famous.
That's funny because when I went to Canada, there were some people up there. They were like, "Have you heard of?" And they were naming all these famous Canadian comedians.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
You didn't know any of them.
And but that same thing with Ireland. Like they're like, "This guy's huge in Ireland," or "This guy's huge in France." And I guess Americans were just so like.
It's interesting. Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas were the McKenzie brothers.
Yes, that's right.
And they were. But what is, we have this. There's so many great comedians that come out of like Canada and Ireland, especially the UK, all over. But it is that thing where we don't really have a star system in Canada. So you haven't really made it until you kind of break America. And that's what's interesting because as a Canadian, you can be quite established in Canada, and then you come down to America, and it's sort of like you have to start all over again. It's humbling, very humbling, because all of a sudden you're feel like you're starting over again. But it's the way it is, and it's you either kind of deal with it or don't.
Yeah, and I feel like anybody like yourself like that comes to America to be a comedian, You guys are really determined, and you also have had a level of success. Otherwise, I guess like the visa thing, you can't have that visa thing or whatever.
Yeah, to get a green card, that's another thing. Yeah. That's so crazy. I mean, I love America, and I love Americans. You guys are, I really find like there's so many beautiful things about it. One thing I will say is that there is that thing about the cluelessness of what we have to do to get down here.
Yeah.
And then
the determination you guys have.
Well, just not only that, but to get a green card, you have to spend I've spent over 10 grand to get a green card, and it's taken me a long time, and the stuff you have to go through, the paperwork you have to go through, the pedantic letter writing, and then I've worked with Americans up in Canada, and they're just so pissed off because they got stopped at the border and they had to write out a thing to say that. I'm like, go fuck yourself. Yeah. You entitled piece of shit.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how easy it is for you to, but whatever. It is what it is.
It is scary, like I will say, I will be one of those Americans that you just talked about. When I went to Canada, like let's say Edmonton, for example. I wasn't moving there. I was just working there for the 4 days. But but you have to fill out it's scary. Like, I don't really travel that much. So when you travel overseas or over other countries, you have to check those little boxes and stuff on the airplane.
It's scary checking a box, isn't it? I mean, how the fuck did you? And how much money did you spend on getting an immigration lawyer to get that pen and check that box? Oh my God, you must have PTSD, Darren.
But you're right. They totally look at me like I'm a joke because my palms are sweaty. Whoever would pick me up from the comedy club, I'm like, man, that was stressful. And they're like, they treated me just like you treated me.
It's like, are you retarded?
I felt retarded. Because they're like, what address are you staying at? And I'm like, I don't know what address. And then I feel like they're looking at me like I'm a drug smuggler. I'm like, I just don't know what address. I know it's a hotel.
It is funny, and this is a generalization, but generalizations come from the fact that they're based in truth a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Is that what is it like? Do you guys just not like leaving your own country? And then
Right.
when you leave your country, it's like a kid that's lost their mom for the first time.
Exactly.
But you're 30 years of age. You are 30 years of age.
Yeah.
You're still breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And you're having a panic attack because your mom isn't around. It's like, have you never, have you guys never been anywhere before? Like, what the hell? You know?
And you know what I was so nervous about? Like, another thing is I had to turn off my phone, so I had no phone. All I could use was the
Hilarious.
Wi-Fi. So I'm like, well, what if the ride doesn't pick me up? Then I got to go on Wi-Fi somehow and email it. I mean, I was just so
I love it.
All these questions. I mean, you're a traveler. I'm not a traveler. I was like,
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is though. But like I lived in Holland for a while as well, and Holland is such a small country surrounded by So they grow up, they have to learn other languages because you leave Holland. Nobody's going to speak Dutch unless they're Dutch, or you know. And even in Holland, there's different dialects, so you got to learn. So they just grew up with this very different mindset of like, okay, you have to travel and you have to speak other languages. Canada is not that progressive, or not, but but I do find it is funny sometimes when I see Americans and they just kind of like, it's different.
I had a friend that he travels, but I'm like, dude, you got to be more humble though, because he was like, I guess some girl was driving him all around Australia, and she's like, aren't you impressed? And he was like, not really. I'm from California. We have everything.
But I like that.
Oh, really?
I love that.
Yeah.
Because Australia is kind of like, it's sort of like this trashy wannabe San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
But I spent a lot of time in Australia, and it is. It's like Australia's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but it's also trash. And
think about California. It really does. We have like the mountains. Like in 2 hours you could be the mountains, the beach. You could be the desert. You could be
California's the best.
You could be in Santa Barbara, San Diego. You could, if you want to, whatever vibe you want. They pretty much have it. And then everyone from around the world comes here.
No, it's great. California's the best. But the thing about Australia is just that it's like, you go all this way, it's on the other side of the world, you fly so long to get there, and then you get there and you're kind of like, why didn't I just fly to Miami? Like, I could have just flown to Miami. Yeah. So there is that element of it, because it is like an American state that's just somehow. But then if you know where to go,
24 hours away.
Having said that, if you get out of the really like touristy areas and you know where to go, and you go to other places, there's some places there you just go, oh man, this is Australia, the way it was.
I got offered to go to Australia, but it was about the same time my son was born, and I thought, man, let me just wait till he's a little older, because I didn't want to miss those years, or even, I know it was only going to be like 2 or 3, I think it was going to be 3 weeks, and I was like, 3 weeks, like, you got to go when your mind's at peace, when you're like, you want to look forward to it, not counting the calendar every day. I want to go home. No,
I lived in Australia for a long time.
Wow.
But I love New Zealand's quite cool. New Zealand is very different. New Zealand, I would say, if I had to compare the two, you'd be like Australia is a little bit more like the American. Even though they're very far apart from each other, Australia and New Zealand, you kind of in your mind assume that they're sort of brother sisters. But New Zealand is gorgeous. It's like British Columbia in Canada. It's so beautiful, and the Maori culture is just like, the Maoris were warriors, so it's like the most integrated place I've ever been with the native culture and First Nations, where the Maoris were like just. When the white man came to colonize it, they were just like, fuck you. Are you kidding me?
I like seeing that hookah thing they do. Is it called the hookah or the haka?
The haka is awesome.
It's like, it's so good.
It's the best. I was in New Zealand. I was in Auckland performing. I think it was 2010, I believe, and it was the World Cup for rugby. Yeah. And it was New Zealand playing Australia, and it was awesome because New Zealand they just completely decimated them.
Wow.
But they're all Maoris, these big, huge, beautiful Maori men that would come out, and before they would start every game, their front lineup, they just do the haka, and it was a war dance, a pre-war dance that they would do historically to intimidate their the rivals. And so they would, and you just watch it and just go, and then these Australians would come out, no offense, but they all looked like you. They were like so ginger and so white and pasty, and they came out and they had on these like, sort of shit diarrhea brown gold costumes, and you could just hear them all like, they're like, Mike, we're not going to survive this.
Did they do any kind of cheer at all?
No, they just sat there like, Australian bogans, just like, if Mike, get fucked, and then they got fucked real bad.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing.
That would be cool to see.
But you see a lot of people, like you must have like Irish or ancestry.
German, Scotch, Irish, English.
That's it, yeah. So you see a lot of people in Australia that are, they're all basically, criminals that were sent over years ago to a beautiful tropical island. I mean, that's weird. I'd rather... And England's disgusting. Yeah. Like the weather's gross. It's depressing. Like I would have become a criminal just to be sent to Australia back then.
I know. That's funny. They, they always say like the drain, the toilet flushes and goes the other way in Australia, or the sink. I don't even know how it goes in America. Yeah, that's clockwise or counterclockwise. You didn't even pay attention to that, did you?
No. Well, no, I do. But it's more, I don't know. Well, the thing is that always like, because there's such a water shortage there, it was always like you don't flush the toilet. If you go to the toilet and you go wee, you don't flush it. Because it's like they get really angry with you.
Yeah.
It's like,
there was a mayor in Los Angeles that said something like that in the 80s. He said, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown,
flush it down. Yeah, I know. And then it's like, it's funny because then I have like other friends that were there, and they're from, like I have one friend that was from, he was from Scandinavia, and his father was always just like, well, here in Denmark, when you go to the toilet, you fucking flush it. Got really angry, because then he'd go home and he wouldn't flush the toilet, and his dad was like, what are you, an animal? Then he'd go back to Australia, and then they'll call him a Nazi because he didn't, can't win.
It's okay. So let's. How did you start? So you were watching SCTV and you're watching Second City.
Yeah. So I grew up just being obsessed with SCTV, Second City.
SCTV.
Yeah. And then I watched. I grew up watching all the SNL, Saturday Night Live, and so I got obsessed with like how it all originated in SNL. Lorne Michaels, and a lot of them all came from the Second City as well. That original cast, and it sort of carried on. And then my generation of when I was a teenager was like, when they had that cast was so good. They had Jane Curtin and that whole era there. That would have been in like the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Phil Hartman and Dana Carvey. I mean, it was incredible.
So good.
It was and Jane Curtin and Phil Hartman, I think, were two of my favorites ever.
So
Phil
good.
Hartman was so good, but Jane Curtin and Phil Hartman, they were like comedy soulmates. The stuff they did, and I always just remember watching them, just going, "Oh my God!" Like I just fell in love. I was like, "That's what I want to do."
And I loved Dana Carvey when he was like, "Well, isn't that special?" The church lady and not gonna do it.
Yeah,
and George Bush. I mean, the whole his characters and that brings up a happy place, right? Whenever you look at that time period of like I said, the Dr. Demento show and old comedy records and SNL and John Candy and all that stuff. It's like that. It makes you. I like to go revisit it. Sometimes I go on YouTube and I'll look up stuff. I saw a sketch the other night from that time with John Lovitz and Robin Williams and Phil Hartman, and it was so good. And I'd never seen it because at that time I was out doing comedy at night, and so there's all these Saturday night shows that I never watched. So it was great to visit.
Awesome. I love that era. I mean, I don't watch it really much anymore. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old and I'm like, it's not the same as when I was young.
But I think it was different though back then, But you're right. It's probably, so you started out in sketch?
Yeah. So then I started and I was like, what do I need to do to get from here to there? I remember just blatantly thinking that, going, I want to be there. What do I have to do to get from here to there? And then I was like, okay, well, I grew up in Toronto, so I started like going to see every Second City show. And I was underage, so I used to I had a next door neighbor, Ellen, who was really cool. She was 20 years older than me, and she used to sneak me in. And I looked older because I was tall. Yeah. So they would never, back in the day when you didn't have to, ID everybody. And so they wouldn't ID me, and I'd get in, and I'd pass as, in Canada, it's 19, not 21. So I'd pass as a 19-year-old when I was like 15. Yeah. And I'd go in with my friend Ellen and watch the improv. And then on Monday nights, they would have... basically that's where they would create all their new shows, so they would just do like full form like they'd get suggestions from the audience, and then they'd improvise stuff, and then they'd take the good stuff and make a new show out of it. And I used to love going and watching that, and I just got obsessed with it. So then as soon as I finished high school, I took all those courses when I was a teenager. It was like they used to do it at the old fire hall in Toronto, which is no longer there anymore. But it was really cool because you got to study in the same place that.
Did you have a favorite improv game that you like to play?
Well, you know what's funny is that now I'm so bitter about improv because I'm just like I almost hate it. Like I'm almost like it's a parlor trick. I'm almost like it's not the same. Like, and I feel really shitty saying that because I loved it at the time when I did it, but now I kind of feel like I don't know if I feel like a bitter old woman where I'm kind of like, ugh. No, but it feels like a sleight of hand, and like it's like, no, you're fake. But so long story short, a favorite game from it was oh my god, I think I used to like it when
I'll tell you a story
go on.
If you still have to think.
Okay, go on.
Okay, the only reason I say about that favorite game is I was the same way with improv. So first of all, you were seeing like great people at it, Toronto, Canada. I was growing up in Fresno, and then seeing people do it in bars that weren't very good, and also in the Bay. When I moved to the Bay Area, it sucked because stand-up comedy, we would do comedy, but then there would be this improv group that would like perform in the middle of the stand-up. So it'd be like 5 comedians and then this improv group for half hour and then 5 more comedians. And so all the comedians looked at it like, fuck man, go find your own spot. Like you're ruining our show with your stupid like they would do the machine, and each person on stage would go beep, beep, and then the other person would go whoop. And so
no, it's so annoying.
So they'd be like,
just
beep,
you want to go put a gun to your head.
Yeah, you're
it's
like, get
horrible.
the fuck out of here, you know.
But as we get hit by a football here in the parking lot. But I used to. It's all good. Don't worry.
But I'll say the game, as far as the game. So having a son, right? My son. So we go for these walks, and every now and then I'm like, I think of those, and I don't know very many. I'm going back to the high school days of improv games. Yeah. And I'm like, hey son, let's do this improv game, and they'll be with my wife and son, and we'll do that thing. What is it? The all-knowing monster. Okay. And you say a word, it goes the. We're like, where did you come from? I came from the whatever. So we do that, or we'll do like little, but more like a memory fun game. We're not trying to entertain an audience. We're just trying to pass the time and keep our brains sharp.
I mean, to be honest, there was a lot of the games that when I was really young, and you're just learning, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. But what I did really like about it was more like what was interesting is that later, when I left Toronto, I met up with these guys that ended up becoming like brothers to me, and we were all the same age, and they ended up creating a show called The Three Canadians, and they had a lot of success in Australia. But they were improvisers from Calgary, and they all started at the Loose Moose, and the Loose Moose is still kind of going.
I like the name of it.
Keith Johnston was their improv coach and teacher, and Keith Johnston was like a legend, and he wrote the book, the sort of improv Bible. And so I think there were a lot of things that I got from it that I really enjoyed that weren't necessarily like the games, but the idea of, not going on intuition, creating at the speed of intuition instead of, turning off your not thinking but feeling and all that kind of stuff. I really dug all that stuff. And I think the games were supposed to be a tool to get to that place.
Off the top of your head, can you think of any, because sometimes we'll go down the alphabet and we're like name a song that's, or okay, not even the alphabet. Well, I'll be like, name a song that has the word tree in it, and then we'll see who can guess first. I don't know if that's an improv game. It's just something we do as we're walking,
I think anything that gets you out of. I think anything that gets you out of premeditative thought.
Yes.
And into an instinctual reaction is improv. That's what I feel. And when you do that, that's the thing about it though. Like when I do crowd work is my favorite thing to watch, and it's my favorite thing to do. And when you feel it and you're in it and you're in the zone, and you know that you didn't premeditate that moment to happen, and it's just an instinctual thing that happens, and it works. There's nothing better in the world. And then when you go back to something that's preconceived, you feel like, I'm faking it. This is me just like, and that's, you can really feel it, the gear shift.
I'm laughing because I just, when I was annoyed with improv and you were annoyed with improv, I remember there was a time that my wife and I used to live in this apartment, and there was an improv troupe that used to live next door, and they were like these young kids that moved to LA, and they used to have a microphone and a speaker, and they would crank that thing up and do their little dumb improv like on Friday and Saturday nights. And it'd be like 3 a.m. and they'd be so loud.
I love it.
And so I wrote a joke about it once. I forgot all about that joke where they were like, give us a suggestion. Yeah. And I'd bang on the wall. Shut the fuck up.
And I bet you they said no, which is like, I bet that's the worst. That's what you're never supposed to do in improv. Yes, and. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I should bring that joke back. I forgot about that joke. But I never said that part of it, but that really did happen where they were like, give us a suggestion. And my wife was like, they're so annoying over there. And
I love it.
Yeah, we ended up moving, but and actually they moved first and then we moved, but
but that's the thing, it's like anything, right? If you see bad improv, you're like, this is so horrible. But when you see people that are really doing it, that are really practicing true improv and doing it really well, it's awesome to watch.
Same thing with magic. Like I saw a lot of the not very good magicians come through Fresno. You know, like they were just, alcoholics and had rabbits that were like half dead. I mean, they were just, like look at these 3 ropes. One of them is shorter than the other, and you're like, boring, But
hilarious.
But then there's great magicians that blow you away. Like especially like close-up magicians. I was at the Comedy Magic Club and I'm talking to this guy, and he's like, all right, he's doing some magic, like up close, like, and then all of a sudden he's like, is this your watch? I'm like, well, how did you get my watch? Like, it's a trip when they take your watch.
Of course.
That's when you're blown away.
It's like anything, you see somebody do something, there's nothing sexier in the world than seeing somebody do something that they're really good at.
Okay, what about balloon animals?
Balloon animals?
Would that be sexy if you saw?
No, I honestly, I have a couple friends that do the most ridiculous balloon animals.
I was trying to think of the most ridiculous suggestion.
I'm serious. It's hilarious, and he does comedy while he does it.
Oh wow!
He's amazing.
Wow.
He's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess I'm out of ideas then, because that was like the worst one I could think of.
That's so
like
funny.
Balloon animals. You're like, that's so hot.
Well, the idea isn't hot, but when you see somebody do it really well,
the way he made
funny.
that poodle.
Yeah.
Oh
my God. Yeah.
And then he put it on my head, made it a hat. Then we did a hat thing. Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah. I wonder if that's a fetish.
Yeah.
If there's people out there.
There are people that freak out over the noise of the balloon.
I could get that. I could understand that.
How did you transition from improv to stand-up? When did that happen?
Yeah, so then I was like, I went to university, and I went and studied theater arts, and I did that in Quebec, and because I was like, I did want to do like to go to school. I enjoyed like using my brain on like that level. Not that it was like a really difficult course or anything, but I enjoyed that in the academic side of it a bit too. And I studied psychology, which I was also kind of flirting with the idea of like going seriously into psychology. So anyways, then I finished that, and then I moved out to Vancouver. And I saw these street performers down on Granville Island. I started doing, what was I doing then? This is like the late 90s. And I think I saw some guys doing street performing down on Granville Island. And I was just kind of memorized by it, like going, oh my God, this is really cool. And these guys were traveling all over the world. They're doing exactly what they want to do. They wrote their own material. They did their own stuff. They decided when and when not they wanted to work. They made pretty good money. And I was like, that's like the most romantic job in the world. And at the time I was working in this, shitty job, making $8 an hour. And I was like, there's gotta be, cannot be the rest. I was so depressed just working for the man and just going, this can't be what life is about.
What were they do for street performing? Was it juggling? Was it comedy?
All sorts of things, all of it, yeah. And then I became friends with them, and I was just kind of like, this is awesome. Like, this is, and then I sort of just kind of got obsessed with it. And then I was like, I wonder if I could create a street show. And then, but I was not like a circus a lot of them were sort of circus trained or had circus background or one, which I didn't. I had a comedy background. And then I was like, but I wonder if I could do like just a comedy show on the street. And a lot of I kind of got a lot of pushback because it was kind of like, no, you can't, like, people, you don't do that. You have to have skill. You have to do this. You have to do that.
Visual. You gotta,
yeah. And then there was this guy who came through Vancouver. This would have been 1998, 1999. His name was Dom Ferry, and he was a New Zealander street performer, legend. And he did the coolest show. And it was all like, he would go down to English Bay and he would put on music, and he would just do physical following of people, and it was so good. He was so good at it, and he was so beautiful in the way he moved.
Like somebody would walk by and he would kind of imitate their walk.
Yeah, but he was so good at it. It wasn't like I know it could sound cheesy.
No, I've seen something similar to that.
He was so like he was like a dancer, and I was like, this is fucking awesome. And he was like one of the first people I saw where I was like, well, that's completely different.
Yeah.
He's not doing like a circus show, and that's really cool. And then I befriended him. I started talking to him, and I was just like, I really want to do street performing, but I don't have these circus skills, but I want to do a comedy on the street. And he's like, you need to do that. And then he became sort of a mentor for me. And then he was like, actually, there's other comedians out there that do street performing. And then he introduced me to Charlie Barnett, who was one of the gurus of street performing, and he was a stand-up comedian who would go out to Washington Square Park in New York City, and he had all these old like Betamax and VHS videos, and he would just like expose me to Charlie Barnett. And he's like, you don't have to do what they're doing, Sharon, check out this guy. And I just got obsessed with like
and I think Dave Chappelle was friends with
Dave
him.
Chappelle's hero.
And they
and then I think when they wanted to make a movie about him, and Dave really fought to try, and at that time he wanted to play him. And the story of Charlie Barnett was that he got the audition for Saturday Night Live, and they basically gave him the part, but he was either dyslexic, some form of a disability where he couldn't read, and so he never went back for the final process because he knew that he couldn't read the cue cards, and he just felt they're going to fire me, so he said I might as well not show up, something along those lines. And they gave that role to Eddie Murphy. So and then Charlie Barnett did have some success after that in movies and whatnot, but he was a heroin addict and died of AIDS, so it's kind of a tragic story. But he was kind of the real, for me, I was like, well, Charlie Barnett can do this. I want to do that. And then it was just like, you're a woman and you want to do comedy on the street? Are you fucking mental? And I was like, yes, yes I am.
It's funny, I never did it. I wanted to in the beginning, like the beginning of my whole comedy career, because you're thinking about all the options. I was going to community college. I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. I had a friend that was a cab driver in San Francisco. I met him. I was on the speech team, and he was on the speech team in San Francisco or Oakland, and he drove cab in San Francisco, and he's like, and he was a black guy, and he was like, man, I gotta take you down to the Fisherman's Wharf, and you gotta see, and he would just open my mind to like, and he was like, Robin Williams used to do street performing, and this guy, and then we watched the street performers, and I was like, and it was one of those things where I was like, I wonder what I would do, because you start thinking like, how do I do this? And then when I moved to LA, I remember my friend took me to Venice Beach, and he's like, you ever heard of Michael Collier? And then, have you heard of Michael Collier yet? Okay, so I guess he won $100,000 on Star Search. And I saw him street performing, and I remember him doing that technique that I think I told you that I learned, where, because everyone's just walking by, you're like, how do I get him to stop? So somehow he would tell everyone, they'd line up, and then he'd tell them, everybody take one step forward, and they take a step forward. And then now people are like, the view is blocked, so they're like, what's going on? And then next thing you know, there's this whole sea of people around one guy, and it's like,
well, that's the one thing that I always credit. I mean, there's a lot of things that street performing gave me, but one of the things that
So you actually ended up doing it?
It was like, it gave me so much. I mean, it's gave me I traveled the whole world as a street performer and as a comedian, and I got to go and see places that I would never have gone before if I didn't, and it was just like so random. Like I just would talk to these guys, and I'd hear about, okay, they call a pitch is where you would do a spot, a show, and I just heard of all these different pitches all over the world. And I was like in my 20s, and I was just kind of like, hey, there's a place in Amsterdam called the Liza Plane, and you kind of show up and do show. I'm going to just get a ticket and go to Amsterdam and go and do a show at the Liza Plane. Like, when I think about it now, I kind of go, oh my God, I was just like fearless.
So could let's say you forget the rules as far as now you have to have a license, I think, right? I don't know about Burbank, but I know you do it 3rd Street Promenade. But let's just say you got the license, they provided it for you. Did you use a microphone and speakers, or you just a cappella?
Both. There's some places where you couldn't, and some places where you could.
Did you prefer one or the other, or did it matter?
I always preferred being able to have a microphone, because then you can be more subtle. You don't have but if you see old videos of Charlie Barnett, he never used a mic, but he just he was this he'd just show up and he had such a presence, and he'd just rock up and he'd just be like, Charlie's here, and then like I'm still really good friends with a lot of the guys that still work there.
That's how he would start a show like that?
And he was
that's cool.
The other boys that work there, they're still there, Tick and Tack.
He'd say, Charlie's here.
And Peter
That's
Rabbit.
Cool. Wow.
And they're good friends of mine still. And they would be like, doesn't matter who you were, if you were in the middle of a show and Charlie just showed up and was like, Charlie's here. He said, you stopped what you did, you packed your stuff, and you got out of the way.
Wow.
Because you just knew it was like, it's not that you weren't good, you just weren't ready.
They were going to go, all the people were going to go watch him.
To not be stopping for, because he was sort of the king of,
Wow.
And so, but if you watch his videos, it's so impressive. I mean, that guy just had so much.
I'll look him up on YouTube.
It's amazing. And when you see his crowd work, that's what I was going to say about, like, there's one really amazing thing that street performing does give you is this muscle of how to work a crowd, because that's what you're essentially doing,
Yeah.
And there's all these different sort of, like, you could say it's a parlor trick as well in a way, but it's like these little, psychological tricks of, like, how do you get people to move up? How do you get them to do this? How do you get, and, when people are attracted, there's a great book, I think it's called Crowds and Power, like a philosophy book, and it's all about how you control crowds and how you gain power of a crowd, and there's all sorts of things that you can go down that rabbit hole.
It's called Crowds and Power.
Crowds and Power, it's interesting.
Wow.
But so then, but I was...
Any tips you could, let's say one day I do decide to do a street performance, like, what do you suggest? Like, what do you...
Oh my God, I don't know. I mean, it's just
it'd be hard to transfer our skills from the stage, but maybe not, because I could do improv and all that.
Yeah, I think the thing is with that, it's one of those things where I always feel it's the same with stand-up comedy. Yeah. It's not something you can teach. You can't go do it. Like you could do a course and maybe learn some things.
But if I was on a mic and
it's school hard knocks. You got to get out there and just do it. You go out, you fall on your face. You get back up, you do it again. You go out, you fall on your face, and then you do it long enough, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm not falling on my face as much anymore.
Did you do that thing where you're all right, everyone, get in a line and come forward? Or
yes, but then sometimes too, like I have one friend of mine, his name is Peter Post. He's a Dutch street performer, and he was like an anti-street performer. He reminded me a bit of Brian Holtzman, and so he would do everything to get rid of the crowd. And he'd be like, he'd purposely get to a point in the show where he'd fail, and then he'd pull like a fake gun out, and he'd like, I'm going to shoot myself. Yikes. And he's like, everyone knew he was kind of in jest,
Yeah.
And then he's like, I want you all to go away, like just go. Leave a dying man his dignity to kill himself alone, and he'd shoo everyone away, and out of reverse psychology, he'd get bigger crowds.
Oh yeah.
So
did you ever how about any tips or cool things that you would see to get people to like pay money and stuff? Because that's the cool part. That's another part you got to learn.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's why like stand-up is interesting. Not to say stand-up's easy, but it's like, you show up, there's an captive audience there. Even if you tank, you get paid for your spot, but street performing, you have to create a crowd, you have to make them stop, you have to make them stay, and then you have to make them pay you. I mean, there's so many different levels on top of. But most of the time, it's like, I always felt like sometimes it's that thing again where you kind of fall on your face and then you go, okay, got to tweak that. You can go too hard on the money, you can push too hard on the money and people don't like it. You cannot push hard enough and people don't pay you. So it's finding that sweet spot of like going, how do you convince people that like they want to give you money? And that's the thing. It's like, it's not, it's convincing people that they want to give you money.
Yeah, we always pay the street performers. We used to stop and watch them a lot, like in Burbank.
Yeah.
And my son, we love the musicians and the dancers.
Sure.
Haven't seen them in a while, not after COVID, but before COVID. I remember we'd be out there, and one of the things that make you want to pay is when they make you feel special, or with the little boy. My son would start dancing, like to their music, and then everyone would start looking not at the street performer sometimes, but also at my son. Yeah. Because it's really cute to see this cute kid like doing these moves, and
that's a classic trick there. Get a kid out of the audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic. You can just hear everybody just
like, oh well.
Yeah. All the women, all their ovaries are turning as they went in the pocket and pull out more money. It's like, oh God, get a kid.
And there was a Michael Jackson impersonator.
Sure.
And we used to love watching that guy, and all that stuff. It was, but as far as comedy, I haven't seen a comedian.
You don't see a lot of them.
Years.
You don't. They're rare. You don't see a lot of them. That's why I was always so fascinated to see them. There's another guy in Ireland who, Dave McSavage, and he went on to do. He did stand up and street as well, and then he doesn't really do street anymore. He had his own television show in Ireland for a while. called The Savage Eye. Really deadly funny guy. And he would just go out with a guitar and he would street perform, and a lot of the times he was in Temple Bar in Ireland, and he was a good friend of mine, and he would just rip people new assholes all the time. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But he would always get, I mean, that's high risk, high reward on the street.
Yeah.
And he would get, there were like every other day he'd get beaten up or a black eye or his glasses broken or, you know, but it was so exciting to watch. It was like incredible.
You know what, if you ever want to go viral, that might be a thing to do, is to go back out there on the street and film and, you know what I mean, have those moments. I've seen musicians do it, and it makes you want to watch. You're like, you know, especially if you kind of know how it's going to end, like they'll have the title, like, you know, like, lady cries when she hears the song or whatever, you know. Okay, so then you did that.
So then but then I started. It wasn't like I did street performing, then I just stopped and did stand up. I was doing kind of both at the same time. I did do. In 1998, I did like a stand-up comedy class, and essentially it was just kind of like to get your first 5 minutes together, to write your first 5 minutes, and that's what it was good for. And then, so I was just doing stand-up around Vancouver. And as you know, it's like really difficult to make money at. It's impossible when you're younger.
I was gonna say, it's also difficult once you came to America, and it's difficult to get in with like these clubs and the bookers.
Sure.
Do you how did you get in with, let's say, the booker of like the Comedy Magic Club? Was there something that he saw, or how did that happen?
So what happened was this is 1998 when I started doing stand-up. So I mean, I've been plugging away at that for a long time. And then I was performing all over with it. Like I did shows in Holland. There's a great stand-up scene in Holland, great English-speaking stand-up scene in Holland. I did a lot of stand-up in London, England, and in Australia. I did a lot in New Zealand. I did a lot. So it's like I had a lot of experience. It wasn't like I was just showing up and being like, oh, I'm new, I'm trying to get into your club. It was like I was already kind of a national headliner by the time I was coming down here. And then I think what was it? Because it was Richard at the Comedy Magic. Oh yeah, so I have friends that would go out there and they would do the variety acts, the parts at the Comedy Magic Club. So I would go out there and hang out, and it was like, oh, they do comedy out here as well, and that's how I met Richard. And then I think I just was like, oh, I just talked to him, and then I sent him some of my demo stuff, and then he gave me one night I got like a random message and was like, do you want to come out and do, you know, a 10-minute clean spot?
That's cool.
That was, and I was like, and so I went out and I had a really good set, and then he was just afterwards, he was like, great set, Sharon, call on Monday and give me your bails. I was like, what does that mean? I'm like, oh no, you're passed. I was like,
it's
cool,
great.
Cool. Yeah.
That's great.
So, but the good thing is that, you know, like coming down when you do have a lot of experience, it's kind of like, you just need to get the opportunity to prove yourself. That's all. Not that but it's not like you're learning and trying to get the opportunity. I mean, you're always learning, but you know what I mean. It's there's a lot of Canadian comics that come down that they, you know, they're established in Canada, and then you come down across the border and nobody gives a fuck who you. You're not. It's like, so.
The good thing
whatever.
I noticed this. What's cool about Canada, like earlier you mentioned it a little bit, is I think like on SiriusXM, like they have to play Canadian artists.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, it's great, right? You could put a comedy album out, and then it's probably going to get played on there, and you'll get more royalties.
You do
and all
really
that good
well
stuff.
with it. I mean, I have a couple albums out on there, and you can pay your rent with it.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal, and it's because they have a Canadian side.
What are the names of your comedy albums if people want to check it out?
One is called Relevant Cunt. It's a children's show. And then I have a couple of albums that are on Just for Laughs compilations. And then I want to make my other show is called Thundercunt, and I was thinking of doing an album on that one as well.
Is it hard to get with those types of titles? Is it hard to? Do you have any difficulties with that?
No, well, it was great, and here's the beauty of it is this is kind of the story of my life, is that like because of that, and I was always kind of like, people were like, you're gonna have a problem, and I was like, you know what, if I do, I guess I will, but I'm like, I don't want to not, this is what I want the name to be, this is who it represents, everything I want it to be, so why am I going to neuter it to something that it isn't? So I sort of stuck my guns on it, and then I shopped it around, and like no comedy album wanted to pick it up, and a couple of them were kind of like, you're going to have problems, we're not going to be able to sell it, we're not going to get it on this playtime, maybe you could call it See You Next Tuesday. And then I was like, no, this is bullshit. I'm giving them half of my royalties, and they're
Right.
making me call it something it isn't. It's not me. And I just was like, fuck it, I'll just do it myself. So I just produced it on my own, and then I submitted it directly, and it's getting, like, he really liked it, and he's getting,
That's great.
and now I got 100% royalties because I didn't
Yes.
go through a
Yeah.
record label.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, rejections are good, you know?
So I have 4 albums, and the first one's called Shady Side.
Love it.
And it was back when I had my red hair, and it was back when gangster rap was popular.
Yeah.
I did a. The reason it's called Shady Side is I would be like I can never be a gangster rapper, you know. Can you imagine? And I'd be acted out, you know.
Yeah.
15 redheads coming to your neighborhood, you know. We walk on the shady side of the street. We're from the shady side, you know.
Sure.
So it's called Shady Side.
Yeah, I love it.
And then the next one was a spoof of Richard Pryor's. It was called That Ginger's Crazy.
I love it.
Love it, right? That Ginger's Crazy.
Yeah.
But here's where I had problems, because the third one, this is totally
Yeah.
like soft compared to what your album. What's
Yeah.
your album called again?
Relevant cunt.
And that's the one that they were like, no, change the channel or
Yeah.
call it something different.
Yeah, yeah.
So mine was called like a stay. I got the idea because you always hear the phrase "stay-at-home mom" or "I'm a
Yeah,
stay-at-home dad."
yeah.
So out of the blue, one day on stage, I go, "Yeah, I'm a stay-at-home stripper."
And that got you problems?
I was
That's
on I was on the
insane.
morning news television show,
Yeah.
and they were like, Darren Carter's in town at the Improv, and then I got my new album, and then they wouldn't let me hold it up. They said because it had the word stripper in
Oh,
it,
that's
stay-at-home stripper,
retarded.
and it was in Florida of all
come
places.
on.
I'm like,
you
yeah.
know, it's so hypocritical too, because
know.
those people that told you can't hold it up,
Yeah.
they're probably going home and doing blow
Right.
off a hooker's pussy that
Yeah.
night, and then they're telling you that you can't hold up
I know,
that
and
album.
I'm like, stay-at-home
it's
stripper, it's like-
it infuriates me. That
Yeah.
stuff infuriates me.
I mean, it
It's
was
just,
yeah.
Oh, like, what do they think? Oh, they're going to be like, what damage are you going to do?
I thought it was the most.
You're going to cause riots or
mundane,
something? Like,
simple. I know. Then the
people are going to die.
I called the fourth one "The Party Continues,"
Yeah.
because I'm the party starter. The party continues.
Yeah.
I probably should think of a name for the fifth one, but I don't know. Anyways, it's like, but it's interesting how they can get caught up in a thing and.
Well,
you
this
know.
is what I hate about all this stuff is like, and I'm not like a far right leaning person, but I'm
Yeah.
also not a extreme left leaning person, but I just feel like all this progression or progressive, it goes too far. It's like, no, it's eating itself.
Yeah.
So now you're actually like, you're telling people, you're basically doing the exact thing that you're saying that you're doing. You know,
Yeah.
you're practicing quote unquote inclusion in the name of exclusion, and it's
Right.
like, but it's done in a worse way. It's done in this self-righteous way of like, it's almost like this like born again Christian kind of thing, but it's done in this facade of wokeness. I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's gross.
I know. It is.
And if you
It's
take
like-
the time and listen to
yeah.
people's content, it's like, it's the content that it is important. Like, what are they actually saying? Who is actually the butt of the joke?
Right.
You're just taking words and putting them out of context, and then you're deciding it's inappropriate. It's like, what is this? Like, are we? Is this like, you know, World War II all of a sudden? Or are we just like,
I know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like crazy.
Have you
Orwellian.
So now that we're coming out of like COVID and things are opening up again, I feel like they're really going to open up. Hopefully, knock on wood. Knock, knock, knock.
Yeah.
Like, I think some more things are going to get lifted supposedly at the end of May with the Screen Actors Guild
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So I feel like the gas can be all down. Now we can try to reach out for these, TV, movies, specials,
Yeah.
all that stuff without any kind of limitations,
Yeah.
I did a special for Dry Bar Comedy.
Oh, that's
and
great.
we filmed it in October. I don't know when it's going to come out,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that was great. And then there's a couple other opportunities like that are out there. Now, what I'm saying is like with the internet,
Yeah.
and these people are making good money on it and then more exposure, and people are putting their own special on YouTube where you don't have to go through,
Sure.
like you said, people saying no and then taking most of the money and then.
Well, it's great
You know.
because there's way more ways to get out there. But it's like there's still gatekeepers. But it's
Yeah.
like before there was just kind of like, okay, Johnny Carson was kind of like the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
But if you got past that gate and you did well, you're overnight sensation. Where now it's like, how many people have late night appearances?
Right.
You have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
Means nothing. Nothing
Yeah.
means nothing, but
It
it,
means
doesn't
very little.
hold the same power anymore.
Yeah.
But you look
like
at,
right now, I could be like, hey, this is Sharon Mahoney. She just did the Late Late Show.
yeah,
or whatever.
nobody cares.
Yeah, in fact,
Yeah.
I met someone that did the Late Late Show the other night, and I wasn't even sure what that was. I just straight up asked him. I
Yeah.
said, I said, forgive me, who hosts the Late Late Show?
Yeah.
And I want to say it was James Corden, I think.
And
like
he's leaving this year too, so it'll be somebody else.
Yeah,
now.
it's like I don't even know the name. I usually just go by the names. Oh, I'm Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know the Late Late Show or the this. It's like, you know.
But that's where I think, and this is just me, like I don't want to sound like, pretentious in saying this, but that's where you kind of, and I'm older. I'm not like a 20-year-old woman anymore.
Yeah.
Been doing it a couple of decades, but I just kind of get to a point now where I'm just like, it'd be great to have certain things happen, but on the same hand, I'm like, realistically, it's like I see people that are comics. You go, no, that's where you want to live. I still really believe that. Where I'm like, if I have to, leave this earth, then you go, okay, well, I never did this level of whatever exposure or whatnot, but all the people that you loved and respected you and knew that you were, this person's, that's to me where I want to be.
I love that we saw Tom Dreesen. He opened for Frank Sinatra 13 years. He actually did the podcast that you're on right now. I'm just checking the battery life on this. And Tom was great. What was one of the things that you pulled out from what Tom said tonight on his the way he spoke to comedians?
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because a lot of the stuff he was talking about, I know, but it's stuff that and you practice and you do already think those things, but they're always really good reminders, and it's essentially it was all cognitive therapy, which is a form of psychology, and it's just like you are your thoughts. You tell yourself certain things, your thoughts, you perceive an event. And then the perception of the event, you create a thought that you tell yourself, self-talk. And then that self-talk will create a emotion, and that emotion will create a physiological response. That physiological response then creates action in the world.
Yeah,
and all of that then stems from everything.
He was saying like how you react to something, and then he told that little parable or whatever, the little boy that throws the ball in the air and he swings real hard with the bat and he strikes out. And he throws it up again and he strikes out. And he throws it up a third time and he strikes out. And he said, well, I'm the world's best pitcher,
It's great.
As opposed to like, well, I can't even hit a ball.
Yeah.
And I like the thing too, he said about how, you when you takes a shower, sometimes the negative thoughts are washing away. The negative thoughts are washing away, and I love that.
It is, and it really is true. Like I think the more that you, and I have to catch myself because there's a lot of times where you see something and then I get sad. I think that's a thing is that I've always struggled with is kind of like, in general, I'm a pretty happy person, but then I'll sometimes, comedians, we all have darkness. Otherwise, I think it's the darkness that makes you want to find the light, and that's why a lot of people become comedians, because they want to try and swim to the top of the
I remember
the water line.
On a sort of a sad note, there was a famous comedian. His name was Richard Jeni. I don't know if you know Richard Jeni, heard of him. He killed himself about 12 years ago. He was great. HBO. He was in The Mask. After that, Jamie Masada at the Laugh Factory said, we're going to get a psychologist in here every Monday if comedians need therapy. We got, it's on Mondays.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember Paul Rodriguez. He goes, we don't need therapy. We need jobs.
That's hilarious. He's not
right?
wrong.
He's not wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I would rather have, what would I rather have? One spot at the Laugh Factory?
Yeah.
Or, would I rather have one therapy session at the Laugh Factory or 5 spots that week and a lot of money?
That's the thing. Yeah. Like you can have a day where you're like, oh God, I feel really shitty today and I don't know why, I just feel bummed out. And then you just go out and you have a killer set and you're just like, oh, that was great. It was better than Prozac.
Right. Or you get that email, Sharon, are you available June 14th for,
It's great. So it is. It's like I do feel it. It's like it's the light and the darkness of, I think, what was your question that we started down this road?
What Tom Dreesen?
So I think that's sort of a big thing is like you are your thoughts and you have to be really careful about what you think to yourself, what you say to yourself and how you perceive events. Because sometimes something will happen and I'll be like the other day this happened, I'm talking to a friend of mine and I was just sort of like, oh my God, can you believe this happened? And I was really annoyed about it. And then my friend was like, Sharon, that is such a big compliment. What are you talking about? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then she was just like, if someone ever said that to me, like that's such a huge compliment. And I took it as like, so it's just your perception of things sometimes can get really...
Right. Were you in the room when he said that Ruth Gordon, she went on to win like the Tony Award on Broadway, and she was in Rosemary's Baby. But I guess when she was 17, she was on Broadway, and they wrote and the host said, he goes, when you were 17, they wrote some really bad reviews, and he read the reviews. Like, do you remember what he said?
Yeah, he said you're ugly, and she's ugly, and she doesn't have any talent. And she said,
and he goes, how did you get past that?
So I never listened to it.
Yeah, exactly. She goes, I didn't let the facts get in the way.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Yeah, and you know what's funny? My Aunt Marion raised me for part of my life, my great Aunt Marion, and she was like, survived the Depression, 2 World Wars, everything, and she used to always say that to me. She's like,
what was the Depression? She didn't get spots at a comedy club?
Yeah, there's in 1925. She's like, God damn it, they won't let women in here. But no, she used to always say that. She's like, don't confuse me with facts. She's like, my mind is made up. Don't confuse me with facts. But it was such a great line where she was always like, doesn't matter. Like, you make to a degree, you know.
You wrote something very nice about your father.
Yeah.
You said he always had books going. He was always into books, and did that.
He was a ridiculous reader.
Yeah.
He was like it was almost kind of like crazy. Like, yeah, he would the ferocious reader. He'd go through like 3-4 books in a day, and
wow.
And I think he was a speed reader, like obviously, but I don't know. I mean, I think he studied medicine, and it was like back in the day where, not to say that medicine still isn't hard, but it was like years ago where like they used to work interns like 72 hours, and they couldn't. If you bitched about it, you just didn't work. Like now they have so many more unions to protect them from things, but they used to work them like dogs.
Yeah.
And so I think going through a program like that, and then he studied cardiovascular surgery, and so it's like, I think to get through those intense programs, you get so good at just going speed reading or picking out things, and then
right.
I mean, I don't know. He never really explained it to me, except that he would just go through books like toilet paper.
Yeah, and you would watch by learning. You know what I mean? Like, you would see your father. He'd show by example. You would see him, and you'd be
I loved my dad immensely. I mean, I still do. He was like when I say complicated character, I think that's probably why I'm drawn to comedy, because we're all so weird. It's like there was he was incredibly smart, but he had a really gallows sense of humor. Like, I remember once sitting with him in a patio, and this guy walked by, and he looked like a marathon runner. Like, he was thin, but he wasn't like bone skinny, but he had some muscle and lean on him, but he was very lean. And my dad goes, oh my God, that guy would make such a great cadaver. Ooh. And I was like, what the fuck? And he was all excited, he was all jazzed about it. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, you're basically objectifying like people on their dead bodies. And he's like, oh no, that guy would look amazing as a cadaver. I'm like, what? That's so creepy. Like, so what makes a good cadaver? He's like, well, he's lean, but he's got muscle. You can see all of his organs really well. It's just a great kind of body to study the human anatomy about. And I'm like, well, what makes a bad cadaver? And he's like, fat people.
Yeah, that's funny. That's good.
So he was but he was really, I mean, he exposed me to a lot, and he never talked to me like I was a kid. He sort of talked to me like I was, he would explain things to me and just be like, which I'm incredibly fortunate, and he loved talking about politics. He loved talking about world events. And
I want to go through a few.
Go on.
I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
It made me think of this. I want to go through a few rapid fire questions.
Go on.
Give me some quick blurbs. Okay.
Yeah. I was young. I needed the money. What?
These are all just random.
Okay.
Have you met any cool, famous people off the top of your head?
Daryl Hammond.
Daryl Hammond, so cool.
Love
You've been hanging out with him a little bit.
Yeah, he's like, I hate name dropping, but
I'm asking you to.
Because he's actually become a real dear friend. I met him when I first came down to LA, like back in 2016, and we just kind of like connected and and he was so sweet. He was always just just wanted, I don't know, he never made me feel uncomfortable ever, and he was just a real sweetheart. And he has a really interesting brain. And I was always, the way that his brain operates and is fascinating, and what that guy has been through in his life, and what he has survived, and what he has overcome. And he still is, he still is always trying to, move forward. And a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier about that, where it's like, he has things that he's still probably battling on a day-to-day basis, but he does it, and he still gets up and he does stand up and he goes and he does all this shit. And I don't know, he's just a really, really cool, interesting person. And he's a real sweet, interesting guy. And his brain, I like his brain a lot. Where he's said like all the voices that he has, they have colors. So he doesn't, when he tries to find the voice or when he finds the voice, it's a color then that's how he goes into it. And I find all that stuff really fascinating.
Oh yeah, I do that too. Like this color right here is black. And this color right here is brown.
I think what you do right now is racist. You're so racist.
I know. Exactly.
You and your toxic masculinity.
I know.
So racist.
Okay, next question.
Yeah.
What is the largest crowd that you remember playing in front of? You're like, wow. Because it's one thing when it's 50 people, when it's 100 people, but
I've never done these stadium shows that I see people doing. That would be really interesting to do something like that. I mean, I've performed to like theaters where there's like a couple thousand people.
Yeah.
But I've never done these big theaters where it's like 15,000. I would probably say a couple thousand.
That's cool.
It is. It's fun. It is. It's great because it's essentially, but comes back to street performing where like, I don't know if you ever heard of Eddie Izzard, who was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Eddie started as a street performer in Covent Garden. And he always said when he played the O2 Centre in London, he said the only way he was able to play the O2 Centre properly as a stand-up was because he was a street performer and understood how to play the big, vast, that kind of thing. So.
I remember Mitzi was quoted as saying, play to 3 people like it's 300 and 300 like it's 3.
That's a great, I used to have a theater teacher that said, if you're getting off and the audience is getting off, it's theater. If the audience is getting off and you're not getting off, it's theater. But if you're getting off and the audience isn't getting off, it's masturbation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, next question. Now that you're down in America, you're here in California, and there's so many fast food restaurants. Do you touch fast food?
Nah.
No, not at all.
I'm a snob with food. My body is a temple.
Yeah.
No.
And you're a swimmer.
I am. No, I am actually. I do. I'm like, I love swimming. I swim a lot. I work out a lot, and I like really gnarly about what I eat.
And what about the fast food? You don't do it?
Nah.
No. Wow.
Yeah.
What happens if you're hungry? You just wait till you get home or something.
Make a salad.
Yeah.
I don't know. I shouldn't. I used to when I was a kid. I ate such shit food, and I got away with it because I was skinny.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, and I just saw so many people my dad dropped out of a heart attack in his early 60s, and it just like you see all these people that you love that just go. Hi Josh.
Hi Josh.
This is Josh Adam Myers.
Josh Adam Myers.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Great show.
Say hi to my fans on the Pocket Party Podcast.
Hey, Pocket Party Podcast. Hope you're partying in the pockets.
He's got a great voice, doesn't he?
And you're very fit as well. I bet you he doesn't eat a lot of shit either.
I know.
He's been working out, you can tell. He works out. So I was in this cab. I love this story. I was in a cab once years ago with a friend of mine, and it was an Armenian cab driver, and he was talking to my friend, and he was just like, "Hey man, you in good shape? You get lots of pussy?" And he's like, "No, I don't get lots of pussy." And he's like, "Why, man? You're a big guy." He's like, "You big? You should get lots of pussy, man." And my friend was all kind of embarrassed. He's like, "I don't got a lot of pussy." He's like, "Take a look at me, man." He's like, "I work out 2-3 times a day. Cocaine, dick always hard."
Oh, wow.
So every time we see a guy who's jacked up like that, I'm like, oh, there's Josh Adam Myers. I bet he works out 2-3 times a day. Cocaine, dick always hard.
That's funny. I love it, man. My wife is Armenian, and there's a lot of like Armenians in Glendale, Burbank area, you know, and gosh,
they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. And I just did an Armenian video sketch with this comedian.
Okay.
My first of all, shout out to my son. I know he's listening, and my wife. But my son just passed the written test to get his driver's license, and now he's taking driving lessons.
Okay.
And my wife was like, however it came up somehow, we're like, imagine, because no offense to any Armenians here, but sometimes they kind of drive fast in the Glendale area. It's sort of known.
Hilarious.
Kind of, sort of. So anyway, so we were like, what would it be like if an Armenian gave my son driving instructions? So I called my buddy. His name is Michael Passion. He's get like hundreds of thousands of views, and he's all these great like sketches that are very, they could be offensive. No one tells him because there's no filter. He just does it.
Yeah.
And so we did one that it's getting great accolades. It's where I play the white guy that's like, hello, I'm nervous, and he's the instructor.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you doing with your hands on the steering wheel? And I'm like, 10 and 2.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, bro, you put one hand on 12 o'clock, other hand on coffee, other hand on cell phone.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, so no fast food. That's good. What was it? I have another question. What's something you've recently, and then we better wrap up.
Okay.
What's something you've recently learned or rediscovered that's changed your life again? Maybe something you used to be into, and now you're revisiting it, and it's making you happy again.
Oh, great question. Let me see. Oh my goodness. I think, that's a really good question, Darren. And I'm trying to think of something that I put down and then picked back up again that I really enjoyed when I was younger, perhaps. You know what? I think perhaps I started watching a lot of. There's this program called Me TV. This isn't like a skill or a talent that I picked up. Where like, I used to play the guitar, and then I started playing the guitar again. I love music, but something that really and I did this over the pandemic a lot. There was a program called Me TV, and and so when I was a kid, I used to watch all of like the old classics, the television programs like Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, and Mayberry, the Andy Griffith Show, all of those, and so good. And so anyways, I started watching all of those again, and you can watch all of them on Me TV. And it's like, it just gave me so much happiness. And then over the pandemic, I was like, anybody who came to visit me, I had a buddy who came and stayed with me for a couple of weeks, and I was just like, he's like, do you want me to give you some money while I'm here? I'm like, don't know. I'm like, no money, but here's the deal. The news never goes on. I don't want to watch the news at all because the pandemic was just, was ridiculous. I'm like, the only TV that comes on is Me TV. And he loved it. It was all like, got into like, and watch all this TV from years ago, and you're like, this is awesome, and you can't help but feel happy watching it.
I know a comedian who's awesome. I want to get him on the show, and it's hilarious because he's very bitter. And he's very successful, but he's very bitter. And he says he only watches TV from the 1950s because he doesn't know any of them.
Oh, that's hilarious.
He doesn't want to watch anything not modern because he's going to get pissed off and jealous.
He's going to get all resentful.
Why him and not me? Fuck that guy.
That's fucking funny.
But he likes to go with the 1950s programs.
That's great.
But it's true in a sense, right?
It is, and there's something so innocent about it.
I love that stuff. You know what's funny? My wife and I think maybe me more than her, I watched a really good episode of Little House on the Prairie. And I know the listeners are tired of me hearing about it, but it was actually really good. It was like a movie. It's like, it was well written, well acted. It's about an hour, so it's not too long.
Sure, Michael Landon.
That
guy was a babe.
And then,
oh my God.
Yeah, and then I saw another episode. So I've seen some really good episodes. I don't watch it that much, but when I do watch it, I'm like, this is really good. And
it's great.
And we watched. I don't know. We watched. Yeah, I love the old. I love that stuff.
And then all the old cop shows. Adam 7.
Oh yeah.
Adam 12. Adam 12. Adam 12 was great.
Yeah.
And that's all on Me TV.
And I've been watching some of that.
Perry Mason.
I love that.
It's fantastic stuff. It's the best. Like, I watch it and I just go, why did they ever do anything else but this kind of TV? It's fantastic.
It's the best. And I've been watching clips on YouTube. I'll look up stuff like I said, all these famous sketches on SNL. Like I'll hear like Dana Carvey. He'll talk about he was interviewing John Lovitz, and they were like, we love when you did your the theater guy. What was that character called? The theater man? The theater man. I forget what it was called. Anyways, and so it was this great sketch with Robin Williams and Dennis Miller and Dana Carvey, and I watched it, and it was so freaking good. I'm like, this is great comedy.
It's interesting. I mean, I think sometimes again, this is just my opinion. It's all great that, we have different voices and we have different, people being represented, of course. But I think if the motive of it is that you're trying to force a message down somebody's throat, as opposed to going...
It takes you out of the story.
It's not funny anymore. It's like, no, it should always be follow the funny. Or go to the funny.
Right.
And if the message comes of it, that's really cool, that's great. But it's like people have lost the plot in trying to make these messages, and then it's not even nice because it feels disingenuous. It feels like I'm being preached to, or I'm being told, and it's like I don't stop watching it, And if you watch a lot of that stuff that was really, like, you listen to Richard Pryor, I don't think he sat down for a minute and was kind of like, this is the message I want to say. No. I think he was just like, no, this is funny. I'm going to write this.
I work with Fraser Smith a lot. We write jokes. We get together about once a week, and you know, we were in Reno on the road at the Laugh Factory, and this other comedian was with us, and he's kind of angry right now. He was angry about the COVID stuff because he left, you know, like he had to leave LA, you know,
Sure.
like a lot of people. It's like he had to leave LA, and he goes, I'm still mad at it, man. I'm still mad about how they locked us down and they didn't have to, and he was really, and then Fraser kind of in a very warm way told him, remember, they're in the comedy business. These comedy club owners are not in the anger business, so got to make it funny, and you know, don't, you know, remember that's the key, is that the priority is comedy, and that really helped him a lot because it made the comedian I'm talking about be like a little bit less angry on stage, you know.
For sure, and there's so much. What's fascinating to me, and that's why I think stand-up is really so. Like, I have musician friends, and some of them I always find, like, I'm always fascinated by musicians. And then, like, a couple of them, they're really good friends of mine, and they're kind of like, yeah, but they're like, comedy is where, like, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Why? Like, music could take so much discipline to learn that. And they're like, and so I like that thing of like musicians want to be comedians want to be musicians. But I think with the music, or you know, the musicians, and the same thing with circus skills, it's kind of like you do have something to stand behind.
Yeah.
Where as a comedian, you're naked, so it's kind of like you figure it out, but you can't hide. If you bomb, you bomb. It's not that your instrument didn't work or that didn't work. It's like, no, you bombed, you know, and there's nobody else here that I have to take responsibility for that. But I think what's great about that is that you learn, you go, if I say something this way, I could say the same line one way or the other way, even slightly different, and get a different reaction.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
In closing, where can people find you?
Well, that's a really good question, Darren. On social media, you
Yeah.
can follow me on it's Sharon Mahoney, SharonMahoney, like Mahoney, 150. And follow me on there, and because I post all of my little crowd work videos and stuff. I know crowd work videos are kind of annoying now because
No,
everyone's
do it,
doing
get
it,
it
but I
out
love
there.
it. I love it, and it's just a great way
On
to
Instagram Reels, that's gonna okay.
Yeah,
Good. Do you do TikTok also?
I do,
YouTube?
yeah,
and all
but
that?
I always get banned on TikTok because I put inappropriate material,
Yeah.
and then they say censorship. So
Yeah,
I've just kind of it sort of
Instagram.
annoyed me.
Yeah.
Do Instagram mostly
Yeah.
now.
I had some luck on TikTok, but then part of me is like, they're probably just going to shut it down.
Oh,
So
I know, yeah.
I'm like, the one thing.
I know,
But
yeah.
okay, so find you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And in closing, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to pass along to somebody out there listening who maybe they're going through a rough time and they want to hear something to kind of, you know, something you've learned along the way?
Well, my Uncle David used to always say to me, all you were ever born to do on this earth is eat, sleep, shit, and reproduce. Anything on top of that is what you make it. So decide what you want to do and do it, and don't stop. Grab life by the balls and don't let go. That's what I say. I think and then whatever it is that you want, like that was a great lesson that he said today. The biggest thing that you could one of the best things you can do is just never quit. Tenacity is really tenacious, is you can, you know, is a great skill.
100%. That's true. As we quit this podcast,
Yeah.
as we wind it down, you
Bunch of quitters.
All right.
I'm exhausted.
Maybe we should do another hour.
Just fucking stop this shit. Just want to
I
go
know.
to bed.
You know what's funny is in this time that we've talked, the sun's gone down, and I'm actually getting kind of cold now.
It's freezing.
It's freezing,
Yeah.
right? All right, Sharon, thank you so much for
Why
doing
are you
the
naked?
pocket
No.
party. I know. Wait. Hey, I got to put my clothes in the parking lot. I'm living my life to the
Oh my
fullest.
God. I love
Thank you,
it.
Sharon.
Thank you, Darren. You're a sweetheart. Thanks for having me. I love hanging
You're
and seeing
welcome.
you.
Thank you, guys. And thanks for listening. And thanks for spending part of your day listening to the Pocket Party podcast. It's so dark, I don't know how to turn this thing off. Hold on. Oh, there we go. All right. Bye, guys. I think I go like this.
Everybody listen to Darren Carter. We all know he's the party starter. So if you want to listen to a podcast for free, then listen to the Pocket Party.